My name is Rita Martinez and I live in Capuline, Colorado. I was born and raised in San Luis, Colorado. My dad was a janitor at a medical center there in San Luis. And my mom was a housewife. I remember my grandma on my dad's side, she was an Indian, she's my Indian grandma. She was a Apache. And my other grandma was very elegant. Just very, very neat and very to herself, like my fondest memories were playing with my brothers and sisters outside and running around and gathering the chickens and feeding the horses, playing with all our neighborhood friends all over, the neighborhood kids around our area where my mom and dad lived. They didn't have very much land. We just lived about 5 acres, 10 acres maybe. And we lived there, and in front of our house we planted our big old garden. My mom and dad would plant a garden, and then we had to go out and weed it and pull all the fruit and vegetables out of it when it was ready. And my dad had this property up higher from where we lived, closer to Chama. There he used to plant potatoes, big fields of potatoes. And we had to go and help him irrigate it and pick them and pick them and put them in sacks and then haul them to the cellar. Oh, we grew pumpkins and the beans. The beans were hard because we had to irrigate them and then we had to pick them and then we had to let them dry and then we had to do all this stuff to clean them out and everything. Then we had to go out and separate the beans from out of their shells and stuff. That was hard. I have 8 other sisters and brothers. There was 9 of us all together. My little brother would just go around behind us crying for his bottle, but everybody would help out. And once he grew up, we were all there. I still remember picking potatoes after me and my husband got married. Well, we did that. My mom and dad planted potatoes. I was already like maybe 24, 25 pounds, around there. And then my dad got sick and he couldn't really do anything, and my mom couldn't do it by herself because she had all of us to take care of and stuff. But my dad was already pretty old though when he stopped planting. My mom kept all where we had our home, our house, and my mom kept everything, the property where our house was at and everything, but my dad was just leasing where he planted potatoes and the beans, and attended Centennial. Our teachers were really nice. I remember until the 2nd grade, I think I was in the 2nd grade, when the nuns stopped teaching school. And then we had regular teachers, and I always had really nice teachers. I liked all my teachers. And our class might have been the biggest graduating class from Centennial. I'm not sure how many of us there was, but it was a big class. And a lot of all our, I used to get along with all the students in my class, with all my classmates and stuff. I mean, our class was really huge. I don't know if because around that generation there was all these kids, and then little by little they just God seemed to be getting smaller and smaller. The nuns were rough. They were really strict. And they were a lot stricter than regular teachers and stuff. And they taught us a lot of religious classes. They're the ones that taught me how to read in English. I met Paul of May of 1975. I was going to Adams State, and he was a senior in high school. And he attended, and we were both, it was the Cinco de Mayo celebration. So I met him at the Cinco de Mayo dance at Adams State. And we got married in November 22nd of 1975. We've been married 40 years. I had 5 girls. I have 5 girls, 9 grandkids, and 2 great-granddaughters. And I'm very proud of all of them. My grandpa and my grandma always made bread and chicos. And my grandpa was the one that made our first horno at his house, at my grandpa's. And there my grandma would make bread and chicos. And my other grandma, my mom's mom, did the same thing, but she had it built outside. And she would cook chicos and bread and her turkeys for Thanksgiving in the hornos. I remember that. Oh, this stove has been handed from generation to generation. I think this stove was my mother-in-law's. And when she passed away, my husband inherited it. And so I brought it and put it in my kitchen. And there we make tortillas. And the tortillas come out great in that stove. It's a wood stove. It's all made of metal. And it has its own, they call it a calenton. They put it's a barrel and it keeps the water hot. It always has hot water in there. Use it for whatever. Well, back then my dad would just cut up all the meat and then we would sit there and wrap it. And then my mom would make morcillas. She would make morcillas and she would make chicharrones. And she would make pork skins. We'd use they'd put this big old lonjas, is what they call them. They're strip of like the skin and the lard. They're real thick. And you lay them on the table and then you gotta get a knife and you cut the skin off the pork and you slice the lard, the skin off of the pork and you separate it, put it aside, and then you would cut the lonjas like long ways like this and then make tiny little pieces of lard and then you fry them, and that's how they made the chicharrones. And then the pork skins, we would scrape them and wash them really, really, really good and put them and freeze them, package them and freeze them, and then put them in the beans. And then after the chicharrones were made, they'd screen them, and then they'd save the lard to make tortillas, to fry eggs, to whatever, you know. And when he killed the cow, there again he would cut it and we would all sit around the table and wrap it and make it to roast or whatever. And then the panza, we would have to clean it and scrape it real good and everything, and that's what you make menudo with. Menudo is the stomach of the cow. And they just pull it out and then you clean it really good. You dip it in hot water. Then you bring it out and you scrape it and scrape it and scrape it, and then it would get cold and you dip it in hot water again, and there you scrape and scrape and scrape, and that's what you call tripe. When I used to go hunting with him a lot, elk hunting, deer hunting, and he would come home, he'd kill his elk, he'd come home and skin it, and between me and both of us together, we would work and cut up all the meat and wrap it and put it in the freezer. Paul's dad, my husband and their family had pigs, fish, horses, cows, goats, chickens, sheep. And I know they raised a lot of that stuff. When we got married, we did plant like little gardens, like we planted carrots and pumpkins and corn and broccoli and all that stuff. So we had a pig and we had a chickens, and we had a sheep. But that sheep was like my girl's friend, their pet. I was a home care provider. I took care of the elder, and I did that for 18 and a half years. I loved my job. I learned a lot from all these elderly people I lived with, because I'd go into their home. They'd tell me stories about how it was when they were growing up and all the cool stuff. And I've always worked in Conejos. I worked in Conejos County and I worked with a lot of elderly here in Capulina. And I worked with this little old man. He was 98 years old. He was telling me about how wonderful Cap used to be. There was an airport here in Cap. Shocked me to hear that. And they had a baseball field and pictures and everything to watch the baseball games. And it was really, I guess it was really interesting here, back in the days. And so I learned a lot from the elderly. They have a lot to say, a lot of interesting. Their lives were really interesting. I took care of a lot of different people. And that's what I loved most of all, is to go in and just sit there and visit with them, telling me about how it was with them when they were growing up and stuff. One of my friends here in Cap asked me if I wanted to take care of her mom. And I said, sure, I would love to. And she goes, well, I'll go on. We went and we talked to the people of the nursing service, and my friend's mom was the first lady that I ever took care of. She was my first client. She was a lovely lady. And then from there, I just kept getting more and more and more clients, and it was really some of the women that I worked with. There was one lady that was telling me that her grandma got married at the age of 12. I was like, what? And her grandmother was 12 years old. She didn't even know what really was going on really at that age. I mean, that was young. And her husband would come home and find her playing with her, holding her doll pushing her doll on the swings or doing something, just too young to really know what was going on. She told me that her grandma was, they used to, back in the days, I guess, the parents would pick the people you were going to get married with. And this lady never told me why her grandma got married so young. And I'm like, at 12 years old, some girls have just started their time and everything, and I was like, gee, that was young. And And herself, she had a hard time, I guess, because they had a lot of kids. She had a lot of brothers and sisters, and she just had and they were really poor, because back then there really wasn't that great of jobs or anything, because this lady that I worked with was like 90 some years old. And she would just sit there and talk to me about her life and stuff. I learned that family, well, I've known this forever, but family is the most important. She says, especially when you get older, your family means the whole world to you. It's the family togetherness and the love, because you need that when you get old. And one lady always told me, she goes, always be good, never be sad, always, always be good. She says, and never be sad. Don't let nothing bring you down, because God is always there to bring you back up, she said. But never be sad, and never let nothing disappoint you. Or she says, always stay in good spirits, and you will have a very good life always. My home, the first lady that I took care of, this was her house. And I really liked it. I thought it was such a nice house. And so and I took care of this lady for 9 months. And I always thought it was so pretty of a house, you know, the way it was built, and it's the age of the house and everything, because my house is pretty old, and it's all adobe. It was handmade adobes, and they used like whatever they could find, you know, wood they could find or whatever, they did it. And so, and I really liked it. And my husband's brother bought it, and he decided to build his own house. So he built a really nice log cabin home for himself, and I bought the house from him. And this is where me and my family have lived for a long time. It was made in 1850 is what they were telling me when I first bought the house. I have structures behind my house. Years ago, they had it. They built these houses, and they're all made of adobes. They used to use those for migrant workers. That's what the stories that they told me, that those structures behind my house were made for migrant workers, and a lot of people, different people lived back there, and they lived there for a long time, and some of them are still standing. We used to live about a half a mile maybe from where I live now, down the road. And we didn't have running water for a long time. It was hard, because we'd have to haul water from my husband's mom's house. And but I managed, and I'm sure my girls have a lot of childhood memories there. Used to sell tubs, and they were deep, so that's what we used to take a bath in. We'd have to haul in water, warm it up, and fill up the tub with water to take a bath. And we had to use an outside bathroom. It was nothing nice, but we had to use it. It was pretty cold. When you get up early in the morning and go use the bathroom outside, it's pretty cold. Just like anything else, you get used to it. We'd have to pump water, and we'd fill up these big barrels of water, and my dad would put rocks on the bottom, and then we'd put the barrel on top, and he'd make a fire underneath, and he'd warm up water, and then me and my mom and my sisters would go and haul it, and my brothers would haul it in buckets into the ringer washer, and she would set the ringer washer right in the middle of our kitchen, And there she would wash clothes all day long. We would wash and hang clothes all day. I had to do that for a long time when my girls were little. I had to haul water and fill up the washing machine and wash clothes, but I'd keep the washer outside during the summer, and then in the winter I would put it right in the middle of my kitchen too. The girls would haul water and we'd bring the clothes and we'd all go and hang it out and stuff. When I got married, it was like right before we got married, my husband and his mom and dad went and asked me for my hand in marriage. And they went and talked to my mom and dad, and it was like a big get-together party, kind of. And then I bought my wedding dress in Mexico. It was pretty. It was really Mexican style, kind of. And we had to have a padrino and a madrina. And they're the matron, the maid of honor, and the best man. And these people, what they mean by matron of honor, maid of honor, and the best man, is that they will always be with you, help you out, and, having problems with your marriage or whatever, you go and, and you talk to them, and they should give you advice about, staying together and what it's like to be bond in marriage. And that's the duty of the maid of honor and the best man. And my mom and dad always believed that at a wedding you have to have something blue and something old. I had my ring girl and my ring boy. They carried my rings and our rings, and oh yeah, and I had it's called a rope. It goes around you, the bride and the groom, and it's like the priest is bringing you together, bonding you together as one. And the rope looks like a rosary, kinda. They're really pretty. It was made out of the same beads and stuff that I had on my veil. Oh, corales is what it was called. It's corales. And they put it around you, and they put it around your husband and that the priest blesses it and everything, and the priest explains what it's what it all means and stuff. And we had a band. We had a big wedding dance. Our band was called Aslan. They were friends of my husband that played in a band in San Luis, and they agreed to play for my wedding, and it was really nice. We did the wedding march, we did the entrega, and the entrega is when you come into the wedding, into the sala where you have your dinner and everything. After you have dinner and the reception's over, they set 2 chairs in the middle of the sala, and there the groom and the bride sit, and they put a big white sheet on the floor, and they sing the entrega. The entrega is that they're entregando the novios to each other, and that they're no longer a part of, that the parents have, that you're on your own, you're responsible for each other, and that's it, And people just throw money as they're singing the entrega. They throw money inside that, on top of that sheet. We did that, and we had the marcha. The marcha comes twice because they for our wedding, they did the marcha when we got out of the church, and everybody was waiting for us at the sala where we had a reception. And they played the marcha when everybody was at the reception. waiting for the groom and the bride to come in. They started playing. When we got there, all the wedding party walked in, and we did the marchas. We did the wedding march and everything, and then everybody just sat down and they served everybody. Everybody ate, and then they did the same thing. They played the marcha again when the dance started at 9. So when all the groom and the bride got there, all the wedding party and everybody just got together and they marched in. They sang and they danced and did whatever, and we had that was during the dance. They have a dance where you could dance with the novio and the novia, and it's the dollar dance, whatever they call it. I think it's called the dollar dance. And everybody stands in line, and everybody gets turns to dance with the groom and the bride. And they pin money on your dress, on my veil. I had it pinned everywhere. Well, the purpose of it is that for the entrega, people just throw money to help the bride and the groom, get their life started, and they gather, and then all the flower girls just all get around in a circle, and they just gather the money and stuff, and they put it in a little white sack, and they tie it to my wrist right here. And the wedding and that's the same reason for the dollar dance for the novios. People just go out and dance and help you out with money, to help get your life started too. They had when I was young, and we were all young still, they had the night before Christmas, we would all the neighborhood kids would get together, and we'd go out saying mis oremos. That's like Halloween kind of, but for Christmas Eve. And people would throw candies, empanaditas, cookies. They pack them in like Ziploc baggies, and they throw them in your little bag, And then in the morning would be like the same thing, but in the morning, Christmas morning, you would say Mis Christmas. And people would do the same thing. They'd throw cookies, empanaditas, and candies and everything in. When I'd get home, my bag was full of stuff, and it was good stuff because baked goodies and all that stuff. The only place I've heard of them doing that, not the night before Christmas, but Christmas morning, is in El Rito. They still do that at El Rito. They gather the kids, they bundle the kids up, and they give them their little bags, and they go around saying Mis Christmas. And but that's the only place I've ever heard they do it anymore. We used to do it night before Christmas and Christmas morning. It was a lot of fun. We had so much fun. And then for New Year's Eve, we'd all get together, be brats as well, actually. And we'd go in everywhere, because this wouldn't pertain Mis Años Nuevos. It wasn't the kids that would go out, it was the older people would go out, and they'd give you shots of whiskey and everything. And me and my brothers and our friends, being brats, we would go and do it, and but they wouldn't, because we were really young and everybody knew we were young. They wouldn't give us whiskey or anything, but we'd go out and sing with all these old people, singing. That's Christmas caroling, but for New Year's in Spanish. They'd say they'd sing the Christmas carols, but in Spanish for New Year's Eve. I remember like during Lent, I was kind of little still then, and I remember my mom and my grandma, because my grandpa, my dad's dad, was an hermano of the morada. And this was like, I don't know if they still do it today or not. I have no idea. I've never gone to any of them. I never attended them after we grew up and my grandpa passed away. But my grandpa was the hermano mayor of the morada. And we'd all have to go to the morada and we'd have to cook all these dinners like lunch and supper and everything. And then all the hermanos would get together inside the morada and they'd pass the muerte. I think that's what it was called, the muerte. And they'd put this statue and they'd wrap her up in black veil and they put her in the middle of this like a wheelbarrow. But it was handmade, it was wooden, and it was specially made just for the hermanos of the morada. And they'd turn off all the lights and everything, and they'd just go around the morada, praying and stuff. A building where all the people that there, it's like he was they used to call him hermano mayor, but they're penitentes or whatever. Yeah, that's what they're called. So on Good Friday, they would all get together and what they do here in Cap, carry the cross and they go praying and stuff. Antes, when I was little, it was the hermanos from the morada that did that. The elderly people, the elderly man, they would put the cross over their shoulder and they would carry it and they'd walk from the morada. And I don't remember where they would walk to, but I know they were all, I don't know if it was from the church or from the cemetery somewhere. They would walk and they would all carry the cross all the way to the morada. And they'd set the cross right in the middle on the altar of the morada. All the penitentes that would get together, and there was a lot of them back in the day when I was little, They would go and make bowls of red chili with scrambled eggs. That's how I learned how to make chili with scrambled egg, because we had to make a lot of it and me and my sisters when we were younger, and and we'd have to set all the tables, the napkins and everything for the hermanos of the morada and stuff. And all the wives of all the penitentes would get together and would go and cook. They had this big old kitchen there at the morada, because it's like a big old building, and the morada is the one sacred place where all the hermanos or the penitentes or whatever would get together, and then the kitchen would be separate, but it was in the same building, but the kitchen was separate. They had this long old tables, I remember. And there is where they velar my grandpa when my grandpa died. Like he was the hermano mayor of the morada. They would put them inside the morada, and everybody would go in there and mourn them, just like they do, like they put the difuntos in the mortuary now. Well, they did that to my grandpa when he passed away. But they put him in the morada, not at the mortuary. They celebrated there at the morada. Oh yeah, my dad was too for a while, but Dad wasn't really that into it like Grandpa was. He was the main penitente there. He had this thing, they used to call it the matraca. I think the matraca. And I was so afraid of that thing. It used to make this really weird noise. And it was I don't know if at that time it was like more or less like a tambourine. Is what I That's what I used to think of it when I was little, because I never heard anybody ever say what it was called in Spanish. I mean, in English. I never heard the English word for it, but it was a matraca, and it was a little thing like about that big, and it was square like that. And I don't know what they nailed in between, and then it had this little crank thing, and they would turn it and turn it, make all kinds of racket. And I used to be so afraid of that thing. No, it does, because they would turn off like all the lights in the morada when they were when it was already late and everybody had already left. They had already prayed the rosary and everything for him in the morada, but the family, just the immediate family, like all his family, his kids, his grandkids or whatever, stayed in the morada mourning him, because we had to sleep there. And the hermanos, all the penitentes would stay in there, and they would do that matraca, and they would tie themselves with chains. They would hook. They had like hooks, and they'd go around like ankle bracelets, kind of around their ankles, and they'd hook it from one penitente to the other, and then they would carry the casket. My grandpa's casket was right in the middle of the morada, and the penitentes, and the very first one, that was the first penitente that was there, would push. They would put this thing there, and it's called la muerte. It was like the muerte, what death looks. And they'd put a veil, a black veil over it, and they'd hang the rosaries around the wheelbarrow. And this wheelbarrow was made of wood, and it had the handles, everything. And the first penitente would push the wheelbarrow around the whole morada, and they would be ringing this. They were all with these matracas and chains around their feet, and they would just go around the casket, around the body like this, all night praying and singing and stuff. I was really little. I was like maybe 10, 11, somewhere around there, when all this, and we had to be there. All my mom and my dad goes, "You guys stay right there, don't you move." And I was like, "Oh my God." And that was stuff, traditions that I remember that I don't see now. I'm sure there's penitentes now, and I'm sure there's a morada somewhere. I really never have attended anything anymore like that. Since my grandpa died, and then my dad just left the morada, I guess, and my mom never went and cooked at the morada ever again or nothing.